Hello, everyone. This is criminal profiler Pat Brown. And today we're going back to 1987. And a lot of times I don't like to go so far back with cases that I did not work on because there's so much missing information. There's so many, like 30 decades of people saying stuff, and you can't really pin anything down. And so unless I'm going to tell the story of the crime, which I leave to other YouTubers, I'm not going to analyze it if I don't have enough to work with. This case is fascinating, and I have something to work with. And so I was willing to do it. I was requested to do it, and I'm willing to do it. And there was a fellow, his name is Tim Masters, and he was convicted of this crime. And then he was exonerated. And I'll get to that in a minute because I want to look at 4 suspects. Tim, who was exonerated, and 3 others. There were 2 other known suspects at the time that people talk about. Actually, there's a few others, but, you know, the 2 main ones. And I'm going to bring one that nobody's ever talked about. So hang in, okay? So I'm going to bring those up as we go. And also by the end, I'm going to reanalyze this because I'm going to talk about the defense analysis. And I'm going to add my analysis to that to show some of the things that I think are just not true. I'm not saying Tim Masters is guilty, but just the way they're analyzing the crime, I'm like, are you out of your mind? So hang in because all of this is going to be there. Yay. Okay, it's going to be really interesting. So first, I just want to welcome everybody who is in the chat room. This is a patron only live, and that means that yes, you can always see all of my videos. Every one of them is public. But if you'd like to be in the chat room during the live portion, yes, I appreciate it if you join Patreon because that's who comes to the lives. It's $5 a month. You come to 8 lives. You're part of the community, and we have a very nice community, and it helps support an educational channel. So since I want to stay educational as much as possible, any support is definitely welcomed. So join Patreon if you'd like to support and if you'd like to be in the lives or one or the other. Also, please do subscribe to the channel. That does make a difference. You can always like a video and you can always hit the bell for notifications so you don't miss shows that are coming up. And also, people keep forgetting this part. Check my playlist out. Please check my playlist out. Why do I want you to check my playlist out? Well, because so many people come to me and say, can you do this? And I'm like, well, I already did it. So look through my playlist and see what you like there. I have playlists on the cases I've done. I have my Hangouts, which I do every week, which is all kinds of information, all kinds of news and other cases which aren't big enough for a show. I also have Dear Profiler Pat, if you like advice, and just different things. I have serial killer, a serial killer one, which is not too big yet as far as how many cases I've put up, but that's on a playlist. Check the playlist. And another way to support the channel, of course, is to go below and buy books. And that's one of my books. It's just $2.99 on Amazon. You want a great psychological mystery read? Personally, it's one of my favorite books I ever wrote. So go check it out. I think you'll really like it. Okay, that's that. I want to do that due diligence because I want to stay alive on YouTube. Now, all right, I'm going to just check back in with my chat room, and then I'm going to go to the case. Okay, so hold on a sec. I'm clicking things haphazardly, perhaps, but clicking things. It is a live show. I do no editing because I'm lazy. We get what you get. All right. So many people are here. Aunt B has now joined also, and Harper's joined. I've said hello to everyone else except Leslie and Slitskirt, and I think everybody else has said hello to. So I'm so glad you're here. I love, and Lisa N is now here as well. And Lisa N says this. Hi, everyone. What a horrible case. Yes, and I'm going to get to all the reasons why it's horrible in a number of ways. Welcome back, everyone. Yes, this is still criminal profiler Pat Brown, and there was a glitch in the Verizon internet, so my show went down, and I had to restart it. So that's why you saw that little black screen and the little message, but now we're back. Okay, now let's hope it doesn't happen again. All right, so we want to get to this case, which I find absolutely fascinating. So what do we have here? This is Peggy Hetrick. This is her in her younger days, and this is her as well, and this is her approximately, I guess, the time she was murdered. All right, let me read you from Wikipedia, which, again, folks, I do not do my research from there. Oh, wait. I think when the thing crashed, I might have been saying this thing about what you should be watching before you do the show. I remember now where I was at before they did me in again. All right. So if you're coming to the show now, and you're part of the public, you're not in the chat room, if you want to stop this video and then go watch this particular documentary, I suggest you do it. It is called Crime Scene Confidential, and it's like a prayer. What is it called? A prayer? I forgot what it is. A prayer for Peggy. It's linked below. No, it's not linked below. It's below. I have the information below, and it's on Discovery Plus. If you don't have Discovery Plus, you probably can't see it, although maybe you can find it someplace else. But it is a very slanted documentary, as most of them are, and a tremendous amount of information is left out, and some of it's just laughable, but it was interesting to watch anyway, so I suggest you watch it. But let's go to finding out what happened exactly with Peggy Hetrick. I like to call her Ketrick. Peggy Hetrick. All right. And yes, I do get this from Wikipedia just because it's a nice little simplified version, and is not where I do my research. I repeat again. I watched the documentary. I looked at court documents. I looked at an awful lot of things before I did the show. But this is just an easy way to read something to you. The Peggy Hetrick murder case concerns the unsolved 1987 death of Peggy Hetrick. Actually, it's a murder. I don't know why they just call it a death. It's not a death. It's a murder of Peggy Hetrick in Fort Collins, Colorado. Keep in mind, Fort Collins, it's important. By the way, people think Fort Collins might be an Army base. It's not. It was an Army base, I think, back like 200 years ago, but it's actually not a military base in the United States. But it just sounds that way. So you think, oh, maybe there's a lot of military dudes hanging around. No, Fort Collins is just a town. So Fort Collins, Colorado. Timothy Lee, also known as Tim Masters. Now they're talking about the first suspect in the case, and let me show you Tim Masters, because he definitely was the one they looked at, and I'll get into the explanation of why they looked at him. This is Tim at 15 years old, and there he is in the room saying, when he's being interrogated, I didn't do it. And this is him today. Okay. Now, he was a major suspect, pretty much the only suspect at the time, but they didn't feel they had enough to go after him. So he went on with his life. He enlisted in the United States Navy following a high school career plagued by police accusations of murder when he was a sophomore at Fort Collins High School. After 8 years in the Navy, he was honorably discharged, which is a good point in his favor, by the way, because a lot of times when people are psychopathic, they cannot get through military without eventually getting discharged. Not usually honorably. Usually, well, I take that back. Sometimes generally, but yeah, actually, sometimes they get discharged honorably just to get them the heck out of there. But he was there for 8 years, not just a year. So it seems like he might have had a very successful career, didn't have problems with the military. So he was honorably discharged after 8 years in the Navy. And then he worked for Learjet as an aviation mechanic until 1997. So things were going well for this guy. You know, in spite of what happened back in high school and this murder, he was doing good. Then he suddenly was arrested for the murder of Peggy Hetrick. He was charged and convicted of her murder in 1999. So we're talking 12 years later, he gets convicted of the murder. And he was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. He was found guilty by a jury. And I'm going to explain why he got found guilty by the jury and was this an issue. Because, you know, I don't love civilian juries. So there's always that. Keep that in mind. I am biased against civilian juries. I don't like them. And not the people themselves or the fact they're willing to put out this effort, but the fact that they have no education, they have no experience, and they're pulled off a bus stop, as I say, 12 people off a bus stop, and God knows which 12 people you get. Will they do you in? Will they help you out? I don't know. Roll the dice. Oh, snake eyes, sorry. Oh, 7. So he was sentenced without parole, but his sentence was vacated in 2008. Now, okay, so in 1999, he was charged and convicted. And it took 9 years. He spent 9 years in prison. Keep that in mind. And before his defense team working to prove that he shouldn't be there, his sentence was vacated. Now, again, understand, I have an issue with the vacated things. In other words, a jury finds him guilty, but behind the scenes, whatever political machinations are going on, or new person comes in, whatever happens, they decide the prosecution was not appropriate, so they vacate. Now, sometimes there's a legitimate reason to vacate, and in this case, it's a little there's a very gray reason why they may have vacated it, because of the prosecution doing some things were probably not as proper as it should have been, but it was vacated. I just want you to understand vacated. He wasn't found, he didn't get an appeal. All his appeals were denied. He didn't get an appeal and found innocent or not guilty by a jury. Although I always find it funny how one jury finds you guilty, the other finds you not guilty. Who's the right one? But all right, so he gets vacated. And I'm not going to tell you why it got vacated, because I think this is super important. I'm going to get to that later with another suspect. All right. And it was found he was not the responsible party. 3 years after his release from prison, Masters was exonerated by the Colorado Attorney General on June 28, 2001. So he gets exonerated, not only vacated, which says, we think that something squirrely happened. You didn't get enough. The prosecution didn't do things right. We don't think there was a proper prosecution. That's why they vacated. But he wasn't retried. And then they exonerated him, which is interesting to me. Not that I'm saying I'm not saying this guy's guilty. I'm just saying it's interesting to me, because things are always done. These things are done behind the scenes, and I'm wondering why. So anyway, he got exonerated, and he's happy. And he's in this video. He's in this documentary, and I have to say, he comes across pretty well. I mean, I rather like the fellow, so I liked him in the documentary. To date, no one else has been charged with Hetrick's murder. Okay, so that's the state of affairs, generally speaking. So he was the first suspect. Okay. And then there were two other main suspects along the way, one of them which helped him get exonerated. And then there's the suspect I bring forth, which nobody's even heard about. And I think you're going to be fascinated by this last suspect. All right. So let me see if Verizon. I'm still on Verizon. I'm just checking to make sure I'm still here. And I'm still here. All right. Am I really still here? So that's funny, because you all said I was here when I came in. Oh, wait a minute. Let me check down here. This is you can't be dumb and do airline maintenance. No. I mean, that's, but there's nothing about the murder that's particularly intelligent. So it just, has nothing to do with intelligence. Most people who commit these kind of crimes, they're all over the place in the IQ range. And I think too much is made of IQ. I think as long as you can get a job, drive a car, you're not living in a home being cared for, you can commit crime, basically. So let me just checking a few other comments here before I go back. Okay. Now, no, I haven't solved the case, but I find each one of these suspects very interesting, but the fourth suspect is just fascinating too. And I want to show you how difficult it is that when you're investigating cases, there are things that link or match, which you go, oh my God, how can this matches? But is it coincidence or is it proof? And this is where people get very confused. And what the defense will do is anytime something matches their suspect or their client, it's all coincidence. Like, wow, that's 20 coincidences. But if one thing matches another person, they go, see, he did it. It's like, wait a minute. So it's coincidence when it's your client, but it's not coincidence when it's their, that's the way it works. So you have to be very savvy. And that's what I try to teach people here. Don't just buy what is told to you. Learn the fact that you have to think. And you have to think through things and say, am I being played? And also, one of the problems with this case, which frustrated me, I watched a documentary, which I say is very, very cherry-picked what they want to show. And then I went everywhere online I could go on to find out information. And it's very limited. I did find one appeal, which was useful. I found another site that finally was pretty useful. But interestingly, they had things on that site which was from the media, regular media from Colorado, which was never ever talked about in the documentary. So it's like, I want to know way more about everybody. Like, for example, they'll say this fellow was quiet, but perfectly normal. Was he? And then they say things about the other suspects, and it's like, I don't have their backgrounds. I'm not getting all the information. I don't know who's telling me the truth. Always be aware that when you have attorneys involved, you don't know where the truth comes in. Sometimes you don't even know where the experts. So it's a problem. So anyway, Susanna's leaving already. Are you? What is it, late where you are? Is it really? Wait. What document? I mentioned the documentary. It is okay. It is this documentary right here. It is called Crime Scene Confidential, and it is. Hold on a second. Let me give you the exact name of it. I listed the name of it in your when I sent over the information on the case. I mentioned the exact name. You have to kind of put in the proper information. I'm trying to find this now for you. Oh, for goodness sakes. That's not what I wanted. Let's see if I can pull it up on Discovery. Hold on a second. Where's my Discovery Channel? It's under Crime Scene Confidential, but it's hard to find unless you know what to look for. So hold on one second. The link is going to be below, but just for the sake of it, I want to try to give you the name. It was in your messages. Where's my Discovery Channel? I've got a lot of channels open here. And if you don't know how to look for it, it will not show up. I don't even understand why that's true. Okay. It's called A Promise to Peggy, not a prayer for Peggy, A Promise to Peggy. It's Crime Scene Confidential on Discovery Plus. I don't know if it's someplace else. And it's called Crime Scene Confidential. It's a series. It's season 1, episode 5, A Promise to Peggy. That's it. And it is misleading. It's misleading because they are cherry picking stuff that they want. That's the problem. They're picking whatever supports the story they want to tell. And it's concerning to me because that's what happens all the time with documentaries. Not that they're necessarily even wrong about their focus, but that we still don't get the truth. And we aren't allowed to decide for ourselves. They're telling us what we should believe. So anyway, let me go now to what happened with the suspect. Why did Tim eventually get arrested and convicted? What happened with him? Why did they suspect him? All right, so let's take a look at the crime itself. What actually happened with Peggy? And you have to really pay attention to what she was doing and why she was, who could have done it? Let's put it that way. Who could have done it? It comes down to, a lot of it is timing. All right, so what happened was on the morning of 1987, and this is important. Keep this in mind, February. I'm going to go back to pointing this out. February 11th, 1987. All right, so what happened was this. A bicyclist investigated what he thought was a mannequin and discovered the dead body of 37-year-old Peggy Hetrick in a field in southern Fort Collins. All right, now I want to point out again, whenever you're reading anything, when they say things, and they do not give you exact information from the police files, you don't know that this is true or not. And a bicyclist investigated what he thought was a mannequin. Did he think it was a mannequin or did he think it was a body? And he went and looked at it. There's a reason they like to say mannequin, because that helps exonerate Tim Masters, okay? So you got to be real careful. Even one word can change how you view things. But suppose some guy saw something in the field and he went over and investigated it, and he found out it was the body, the dead body of 37-year-old Peggy Hetrick in a field in southern Fort Collins. According to the coroner, she had died from a single stab wound in the back, likely very early in the morning. And this is true because here's the story. She was at this bar, okay? She ended up at this bar, and she ran into her on again, off again boyfriend And supposedly he was like meeting another woman. But anyway, they were on again, off again. So it was kind of a weird relationship. And it supposedly was a little argument. But anyway, he said he would give her a ride home. Her home was here at this apartment. She said she would take the ride, but then apparently she was seen leaving the bar. And here gets murky. Here's where murkiness comes in. He saw her leave the bar by herself. It just like he looked up and said, "Oh, she's already gone." I can't find any information about anything else that happened in that bar. It annoys the hell out of me. Because if this was the last time Peggy Hetrick was seen, why don't we have absolute information about all the people who were there? He was there, supposedly, then with another woman. He supposedly then, that woman said they left together. Peggy Hetrick left on her own. He's like, oh, well, she's gone. And so he didn't give her a ride home. He went home with the woman he was there with. They went to his place. They hung out, whatever, till halfway through the night, 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, doing whatever they do, after you drink in a bar. But what about all those other people in the bar? What about the bartender? What about everybody who knows Peggy? Why do we have no information? And the documentary doesn't give us any. But we have this. She was in the bar. She didn't take the ride home, supposedly, walked out the door. And her body was discovered here. So she would be walking from the bar down here, and then she would be going up here to her house. It's not far away, but it was like 1 o'clock in the morning. And her on again, off again boyfriend maybe was just trying to be nice, saying, hey, let me give you a ride home. It didn't mean that he was going to hang out with her. Just like, I'll give you a ride home, maybe roll back to the bar to his the new girlfriend or whoever he was hanging with. But she didn't take it. So at least that's the theory. So she ends up here, dead, within half a block of the bar. This is very important. And I will bring all this together later. But this is where she ended up dead, in a field. Okay. They found her body. Okay, let's see. Here we go. Hold on a second. I forgot to turn off my phone. I just saw it flashing at me. They found her body. So see this curb going up here? They found her body. There was blood on the curb, and then there was drag marks into the field. Her body had been sexually mutilated with a precise removal of her left nipple and areola, as well as a female circumcision, including what one doctor described as a partial vulvectomy. And I'm not going to go further than what that doctor said, because the key word there is one doctor. Okay? One doctor. All right. One doctor. And this is where things get weaselly. Is that a word? And documentaries, and no matter where you see things. One doctor said, I can find a doctor any place to say anything. I can find an expert to say anything I want. That's what happens in a court of law. You bring in that expert and he says something, and this expert says the other thing. One doctor is not meaningful. But I can tell you this. She was stabbed in the back. Somebody dragged her into this field and left her in the field. There's no question about that. There are drag marks. She's in the field. She has her pants on, although pulled down. She has her clothes on, but sort of pulled up. There is left side missing. There is something done down below, which is pretty concerning. All right. And here, I'm going to show you this. I won't show you a picture of her body and all that kind of stuff, but I want to show you this picture for a purpose. Here she is. She's lying there. This is a purse, in case you're wondering what that is. So her head is up here. So arms are here. She's sort of like, anyway, this is a purse. The purse is with her. This is important. The purse is with her in this field, on her body, essentially. Like she had it over. And the purse is with her. That's important. All right. So now let's look at the rest of the information on this. All right. So before the bicyclist found the body, however, before he found the body, the bicyclist saw the body. He went over and said, oh my God, it's a body. It's a dead person. He called the police. But before that happened, 15-year-old Timothy Masters saw it while walking to school at daybreak. Now, mind you, his house was right at the edge of where that field was. He could look out of his house and actually see the body if he wanted to. He gets up in the morning, he walks to the bus stop, he cuts across the field. So he cuts across the field, and his father said he saw his son leaving, and his son sort of looked to the left and walked over to where the body was, because his footprint is actually found near the body. And it says that he looked at it and walked away, and then got on the school bus, went to school, thinking the body was a mannequin left as a prank. Masters did not report the body to the police. All right. The other fellow looked over and supposedly thought it was a mannequin, but from a distance, maybe you'd think that. But he went up and said it's body. Well, he was right on top of it. And he claimed, the claim that he made was it was a, where is this thing he claimed it was? Hold on a second, I gotta find the picture of this. Oh yeah, he claimed it was he claimed it was one of those dolls. You see, where you learn how to do CPR and stuff. And he thought it was one of those dolls. And see, that's one of those dolls look like, and this is a defense team putting this crap together because they're trying to make it look like, look, she looks just like the doll in the box. Okay. I'm pretty sure if you're that close, you know the difference between a doll, and a human being that's dead. I'm pretty sure, especially if you see the proclivities he has for his extreme interest in brutal, vicious, murdering crimes. I'll get to that in a minute. So anyway, he stopped, he looked, went to school, didn't report it to anybody. After Masters' father, Clyde Masters, told canvassing police that he had seen his son deviate from his usual path across the field to the bus that morning, police pulled Masters, then a 5'10", 120-pound high school sophomore named Toothpick. They're going to make sure that you understand that he's very, very slight, that he wouldn't have the strength to do this crime. I'm just pointing that out because this is the way things are presented. Took him out of class for questioning. All right. Early on in the investigation. By the way, his dad was very cooperative with the police. Maybe wonder what his dad knew, because he was like, oh, yeah, my son looked over there. My son did that. And then he's like, yeah, you can interview my son. You don't need a lawyer. He was very forthcoming, and it made me wonder, because, people aren't usually that lenient. You know what I mean? They're usually more concerned if the police come after their kid. They're like fairly freaked unless they think. Yeah. So anyway, early in the investigation, lead investigator, Fort Collins detective Jim Broderick. Now, Jim Broderick is the one who basically got screwed later on because they claim that he left out information, and that's one of the reasons he got exonerated. Okay. And I'm not saying Broderick, I try not to get into the whole legal aspect of the cases. That's a whole nother kettle of worms. You know what I mean? I don't want to get into all that because then I'd have to study it for God knows how many weeks and months to determine what the legal aspects of everything were. I'm just saying that Broderick had his opinions. He believed this guy was guilty. And eventually they said that he did not handle things properly and in discovery and so on and so forth. So therefore, that's why he got convicted. And that's a whole nother issue than guilt or not guilt. All right. So he centered on Masters as a primary suspect due to his failure to report the body found on the way to school. All right. People will jump all over this guy because he focused on this kid. But the kid saw the body and didn't report it. You got to wonder about that. So then they went and interviewed him. They went to his home. First of all, let's go to his home. And so this is why Tim Masters became a suspect, for a perfectly good reason. All right. Tim Masters really liked knives. I mean, he loved knives. Survival knives. He had piles of this crap. And the detective saying they're designed for killing people, right? Because he's got so many of them. I mean, I'm not kidding you. He's got a lot of them. Let's look at some of them. And this is just why he's looked at, all right? As opposed to he also had tremendous amount of books. He admits he was into gore, and murders and all this. He was totally into this kind of stuff and into a lot of the graphic, comic booky type stuff where people kill and stuff like that. So he had pictures like this. You have a lot of pictures of killing women, don't you? And he's calling this woman a bitch, and he's shooting her in the head. Okay. Somebody cutting legs off. Oh, sorry, that's not it. Where's my pictures? Oh, here we go. And then we have Okay, so guy's putting a nail through somebody's tongue. This guy's getting chopped, I guess. This person is cutting his throat. Yeah, there's a lot of unfortunate, very unfortunate drawings. How many did he have? Apparently 1,000. He said he drew them in class. Okay, so what happens now is that what you're going to get when you look at the documentary is a guy explaining, and a really nice sounding guy, explaining how when he was a young kid, he was totally into the gore thing, which some people are. Some kids are into this. Doesn't make them murderers. And this is what the defense will point out. Doesn't make them murderers. And that he was just into this. He wanted to be a writer. He wanted to be an artist. He has his explanation. I don't know what his total explanation then was, but he's had a decade and a half to figure out what his explanation is, while you're sitting in prison. So you can come up with a good explanation. It could be true or could not be true. So there's the problem. So anyway, he had 1,000 pictures like this, which were just gore, stabbing, anti-females. His mother had died 4 years ago. And by the way, almost to the day that Hetrick was killed. Mother also had red hair like Hetrick. Some claim that he killed Hetrick because it looked like his mother. Who knows? I never go for that totally. But anyway, he had a massive knife collection. He says he only had the knife collection because he was into Rambo, but he was into homicide. He wasn't into Rambo protecting, Rambo in the army. He wasn't into that. He was into brutal, vicious murder pictures. Tons of them, with a knife collection, which is pretty extensive, mind you. He lived with his dad. He was a loner. He had all the weirdo characteristics. He was at the crime scene. He lived right next to the crime scene. This was the beginning of why they looked at him, okay? So I just want you to understand that if Broderick did wrong things later on and trying to get him convicted, that's a whole nother issue. But there was a reason he became a suspect. And some people say, how dare that he became a suspect? No, I'd be looking at this guy. As a profile, I would be looking at him. So I want you to understand that I would do that. Okay, then he was questioned. He was questioned heavily. He did not confess. He did a polygraph. It came back inconclusive. Over 1,000 pages of Master's violent artwork were entered into evidence. All right. Here is what pretty much got him convicted, though, I believe. All right. He has a picture of this guy dragging a human being, the bloody trail. Interesting. He claims he drew this after the murders because he heard after the murder had happened. But then again, he's drawing exactly what happened in the murder. And the question is, how did he know this is exactly how it happened? This was the picture that really did him in. I'm not even going to say what it looks like, but I think all of you know what it looks like. All right. Now, this is some of what happened with Peggy in this vicinity of the body. When they put this next to the picture of what happened to Peggy, the jury went, oh my God. Now, was it a dirty trick by the prosecution to make it look like these two things matched? Maybe. And if you watch a documentary, it's pretty funny because this is how stupid sometimes documentaries get. So there's people in there, I can't remember which one it is, go, oh, well, I don't think that necessarily shows a female part. I think that could show cutting through cardboard or cutting into a wall. And this guy never showed pictures of knives being cut through cardboard. He didn't have an interest in that. This was cutting through human flesh. Now, mind you, it could just be cutting through like this and the wound opens. Could be that. It doesn't have to be a female part. I think the prosecution put that together really nicely. I think this is showing mostly that it was making an incision and this opened up and the knife was now at the bottom. Was it human, in my opinion? Yes. Was it necessarily a female anatomy? No. But that's what got him convicted. The jury decided that he lived right on the top of the crime scene. The woman was dragged into the field where he could see it from her house. He came out of this house the next morning, went over, looked at her, claimed he didn't know it was a human. It was a doll. never told anybody. And he had this whole unfortunate, scary way of thinking. Now, mind you, they also brought in somebody. This is years later. Mind you, at the time, they didn't feel like they had enough. And the reason they didn't think they had enough was because when they went to his house, they could not find blood on any of the knives, blood on any of his clothes. They could not find any physical evidence linking him to the scene. Now, as a 15-year-old, you have to say to yourself, well, 15 years old. Is he clever enough not to leave any evidence behind? And so when they searched his house, they could not come up with anything linking him to the crime physically. So that's why he, wandered off for all those years and did not get convicted. However, this is what happened later on. So, let's see. I'm trying to figure out where this was. Okay, so in 1992, during an interview with a former fellow high school student, investigators discovered that Masters told his friends details about the sexual mutilations. The investigators thought this information hadn't been made public or disclosed to Masters or his defense attorneys. They thought that only the killer would know these details. Investigators interviewed Masters again, where he was serving in the Navy. He told investigators that a friend in his art class had told him about the mutilation, that she had been part of an explorer's scout group helping the police search the crime scene. And he was told of the nature of the mutilations early in the investigation. Is this true or is this not true? I don't know, because who's the person that told him? Why do we not have an interview with that person that said, absolutely, I told him? We just have his claim, which bothers me. Oh, he says his story checked out. Who says that? I don't know who says that. All right. And the investigation reached a dead end until 1997, when Broderick, the detective, contacted a forensic psychologist from California, Dr. J. Reed Malloy. Now, Dr. J. Reed Malloy, I went to look for the book. I have his book in my collection. I think I put that in the storage because it's a big book. And I'm trying to recommend books. And when I start the profiling school part, I only want to recommend books people are going to spend time reading. And his is like really difficult to get through, but it's very interesting. He was hooked up with the FBI. Malloy analyzed Masters' writings and artwork extensively and concluded, without having ever spoken to Masters, which he could not, since Masters was protected by the Fifth Amendment rights, that some of the drawings represented Masters reliving the crime. Based largely on Masters' testimony about Masters' drawing, Malloy's testimony about Masters' drawing, including one that Malloy interpreted as a knife cutting into a vagina, and another drawing of a body being dragged, Masters was convicted in 1999 of Hetrick's murder and sentenced to life in prison. Although some jurors had doubts about his guilt, the drawings and writings shown to the jury were cited by jury members as compelling evidence against him. All right. So Malloy basically did him in. Okay. Do I agree with Malloy? Okay. I'm going to say this about him, and then I'm going to the other suspects. There was no physical evidence connecting him to the crime, which is concerning. At 15 years old, in the middle of the night, he commits this crime. His hair was not found on the body. His DNA was not found on his body. There was his tennis shoe, which he had been wearing the next day when he supposedly looked and saw the body, and he walked close to it. And it bothers me about the shoe print wasn't close enough to the body where he should know it was not any kind of mannequin. But those were his shoes that day. But the shoes he wore the night before, I don't know. There was no shoes to connect him to the murder, is what I'm saying, outside of the fact that we know he walked near the body the next day. So no hair, no DNA. We'll go to his house, doesn't find any of the victim's blood in the house or on his clothing, whatever. Could he be guilty without the evidence, that kind of evidence? Well, it was, when was this? And I still can't figure this part out either. February 11th in Colorado. Now, I don't live in Colorado. I know it can get very cold in Colorado, and sometimes it can be not so cold in Colorado. She was wearing, she didn't seem to have heavy clothing on. So I'm assuming it wasn't that cold, but I don't know what he could have been wearing. He could have been having a hat on, could have been having a coat on. He could have had gloves on, in which case, since she was not raped, mind you, so there's no semen evidence there at all. since she wasn't raped, essentially, she was stabbed in the back, and then she was dragged, which would also, if you're dragging somebody underneath the arms, doesn't mean that the blood is getting on you. Then when you dump her in the field and then you pull down her clothes, pull up her clothes, and do things with a knife, if you got your hair under a cap and you got gloves on, you're not going to leave DNA or hair. So sometimes the problem is killers do not leave that. Now, would a boy this age know this? Just maybe the way he dressed anyway. I don't know. Was he smart enough to go? I don't know if his shoes showed anything. I just don't know. But they didn't find any physical evidence. So would I, if I'd been on that jury, convicted him? Yeah. I mean, I will go with Malloy. The documentary keeps saying how he's such a normal boy. I'm sorry. 1,000 pictures of people being murdered and brutalized, calling women names is not normal. I mean, if I saw my son having that, he'd be at the therapist the next day. He had a sick mind as a 15-year-old. I don't know what was wrong with the boy, but he had something wrong with him. He had a very, very dangerous mind. That is the kind of kid you worry about. That is the kind of kid you wonder is a psychopath, a violent psychopath. You definitely worry about him. Doesn't mean he committed the crime, but surely a good suspect. Would I have convicted him on that evidence without any physical evidence? I don't know that I would have felt comfortable convicting him, even if I thought he did it. Okay. So do I think the jury did the right thing? I question it. I think because they didn't have the physical evidence at all for a 15-year-old kid. They may have absolutely believed he did it because there's a whole lot of information we don't have. And maybe there's a whole bunch more we don't know, but they believed he did it. So what could exonerate him? And I'm going to get to the exoneration part now, and whether I believe he was exonerated or whether I just believe maybe he shouldn't have been convicted because the evidence wasn't there, but does that prove he's innocent? So I'm going to get to the other suspects now. All right. Many comments. Let's see. Let's see. They were not typically teen stuff. That absolutely not. I disagree with that 100%. There are types of teen drawing, boy drawing. Boys can be really disgusting. The types of drawings he had were specifically gruesome, full of gore. And yes, he said he read lots of books and this was his whole thing. He was into the whole gore thing. But they're not necessarily typical. If my son did all of those drawings, I would be worried. I would be worried. I have 2 sons. Either one of them. I'm sorry. I never saw drawings like that. I saw stupid drawings, but not thousands of violent drawings. That is concerning. It doesn't mean he's guilty. It just means they're concerning. Previous animals tortured. That is not a requirement to be a serial killer or a sicko. By the way, that's over. There's a triad. This is what people talk about when it comes to serial killers. They say they wet the bed, they murdered little animals, and they set fires. There's a reason these 3 are chosen. The reasons are that these are all things kids can do before they leave home. They don't have a car. They're stuck at their house. What can you do to take power and control and piss people off? Bedwetting. Mom, too bad. Okay. That's a thing you can control. That's something you can do and really, really upset everybody. 2, killing little animals. Well, they're easy. Oh, look, a toad. Look, let's pull the legs off of this spider. Oh, look, a kitten from next door. These are things you can do and get away with and get the thrill out of killing without having to leave the house, essentially, or the property, or you could be walking to school and kill off something. I always remember this one, I can't remember what serial killer it was, but he said there were he liked to put little cherry bombs or something put on the legs of kitties. And he said there were a lot of 3-legged cats in my neighborhood. And one fellow I actually knew, who I suspected to be a serial killer, he said he talked about how he buried a kitten in a lawn with his head sticking up and then ran the lawnmower over it. And he thought that was funny. I don't know if he actually did that or he just got it from some other serial killer. But that you would say that is even sick. The third one is arson. Again, something you can commit in your own home. You can burn down your neighbor's shed. These are things you can get power and control. doesn't mean that every serial killer exhibits each one of these. And of course, we can never prove it anyway. If he was killing off animals in the neighborhood, how would we know? If he burned up a few places, how would we know? We don't. We have no clue. So it's interesting, but it's not necessarily proof of anything. So, yeah. So let's say, was he bullied? I don't know. Bullied. The stuff about bullied is getting so overdone these days. Everybody's, once we were used to grow up and we used to, things were not always perfect, but now everybody's getting bullied. I knew a guy who drew similar things about 13 years old when he's bullied. Okay, torturing his bullies. How about killing innocent women? There's things that you do, but he's got 1,000 pictures. The only thing I'm pointing out is it's not healthy. Okay, you can say, oh, it's normal for boys. I'm sorry, that's not normal for boys. It is not. It is abnormal. It's abnormal for a reason. Could it be that he was, as you were trying to point out, bullied and therefore he's angry? Sure. It's not normal. It's his response to something abnormal. But if you got 1,000 of these pictures and they're super violent, is he just a budding artist and writer? Maybe, but it's not healthy. And I say, if my sons were doing this stuff, I would be concerned. I would be super concerned. If I had a 10-year-old daughter, when my daughter's growing up, if she started writing stuff about sex when she was 10 years old, I would be concerned because it's not normal. It's something wrong. And I think they had a reason. I drew mermaids. You just wanted to be another species. The point is, Broderick, good or bad dude, had a reason to focus on him. But now let's get to the other suspects. Okay, we should be fair and get to all the others. 3 more interesting suspects. And this is what makes the case actually fascinating, because there are 3 other suspects you go, and one of them has never been brought to light, and I'm going to bring it to light today. Yeah, because I couldn't believe it when I started investigating this case. I'm like, what? Okay, so anyway, let's go to the suspects. I'm going to put up the pictures of the other suspects. Let's see, who are they? All right, we have these 3 guys. Where are they? Oh, here they are. All right, these 3 guys. All right, the next suspect actually on the list. Now, mind you, this was the boyfriend she was at the bar with. Interestingly, he never became a suspect at the time. And I'm going to bring him up later for a good reason. All right, because this is what got Tim Masters exonerated, this guy. But he was not a suspect at the beginning because he was in a bar. He said he offered her the ride, but she left, and she gets killed right outside the bar. Apparently gets stabbed outside the bar. But this guy becomes a suspect for a number of reasons. Later on, when they look back and say, oh my God. All right, let me tell you who this fellow was. All right, this guy is Dr. Richard Hammond. Now, he lived also close to the field. And this is important because of location, obviously. Now, I think the documentary and a few other people try to claim that he was overlooking where the body was, but then they kind of say he was like overlooking the field. Well, the field is large, so it doesn't mean he was overlooking the body. But yet he was near the field, which puts him in the vicinity, which is interesting. Now, listen to this. In 1995, 7 years after the murder, and 2 years before the retention of experts for the Masters trial. So this is before the Masters trial. Dr. Richard Hammond, an eye surgeon, this is going to be important, the eye surgeon aspect, was arrested for secretly filming women's genitalia, including that of his own female family members, through fake ventilation grates in his downstairs bathroom. Not a nice guy. Oh, what a creepo, man. Here's some of his equipment there that he's filming with. All right. The cameras were positioned to allow for detailed close-up viewing of the women's genitals while they were sitting on the toilet. Investigators also found that Hammond kept thousands of dollars worth of pornography hidden in a locked office. This is way before Pornhub. And in a storage shed in town. And this is the kind of creepy stuff the serial killers do, by the way. They got places that you can't, whoever lives in their home should not access. And then they have storage sheds or someplace else that they know nobody's going to get to. So he has thousands of dollars worth of pornography. That's a lot of pornography. Hidden in a locked office and in a storage shed in town, indicating an obsession with female genitalia. Because he was only into eyes for his job, but I guess he was a little lower for his hobbies. Oh Lord. Now, here's where the first. There's a number of issues here. One, it was in the vicinity. Two, he's a creeper. He is a creeper and a pervert, and he's proven creeper and a pervert. This is not questionable. He's a pervert. They have evidence, solid 100% evidence. He's a pervert. So get that. But here's where it gets tricky. If I go back earlier, and a lot of people say a doctor, the defense people, the TAME or whatever, brought somebody forth, and they asked a doctor about the what happened to Peggy, the cuttings on Peggy, and somebody said this. A doctor said this would take surgical skill. So only a person with surgical skill and a good instrument could have committed this crime. In other words, 15-year-old boy with his knife collection couldn't have possibly done this and done that, or whatever they did down there, in a way that I see this as professional. Now, again, we hear one doctor said this, and this is where I get bugged again. I have had so many cases where they swear up and down it was a professional that did this. It was a medical professional had to have committed the crime because of the surgical skill. Now, interesting enough, then they believe this guy did it. He's no surgeon. So wait a minute. If he can do it, why can't the 15-year-old do it? Make up your mind, you know what I mean? Make up your mind. Did the boyfriend who has no surgical skill do it? Or did this guy have to have surgical skill and had to be a doctor? So anyway, he did have surgical skill because he's an ophthalmologist. And I, of course, looked that up. An optometrist is, you go and get your eyes checked. Ophthalmologist does actual eye surgery. And he specifically does whatever he does with eyes and scalpels and crap like that. So does he have skills to do fancier stuff? Absolutely. But is this true for the crime, or is somebody, again, one doctor claiming this for whatever reasons? And I do not know the answer to that, because we don't have 10 doctors who looked at this crime without any bias and came up with 9 doctors said there's no way in God's earth this could happen without a surgeon being involved. Or do we have 9 people who say, my son could do that? I don't know, because we have one doctor, and that's all that's ever pointed out, and it drives me nuts. So anyway, because of the one doctor, it says, as a surgeon, Hammond had the skill and equipment to perform the precision mutilation that one doctor claimed. I don't know how precision mutilation it really was. Found on Hetrick's body. In 1987, Hammond's bedroom window overlooked the location where her body was discovered. And again, exactly where her body was, or the field in which her body was discovered. And I'm going to talk about why this, the location is still interesting. But I think it's a little odd to me. Here's what I think is odd. I'll bring it up right now, as a matter of fact. This guy's a professional. If he committed this crime, I think the last thing he would want is that her body be right near his window. A 15-year-old kid is kind of a dumbass. So that if a 15-year-old kid has no vehicle and he stabs her in the street and pulls her into the field, well, he's just going to kill her where he's going to kill her, right? It's just already been stabbed. So he's going to do what he's going to do, and then he's going to run home. This guy, you think he's going to pull the body from the curb into the field near his house when he's already a pervert and does all kinds of other things? Do you think a professional would take that chance? I find that questionable. Okay, that's just something I'm putting out there. All right. And so it says he was home the morning after the murder, despite his usually scheduled surgeries on the day of the week. Okay, maybe why was he home? Just because he killed somebody doesn't mean he doesn't go to work in the morning. I don't know how many serial killers kill on the way to work, show up with a cup of coffee in their hand. They just killed somebody 2 hours ago, and they're like, hey, everybody, how you doing? Nobody has a clue, because he's there at work at 8 a.m. So that's meaningless to me, and I don't know why he was off of work that day. Maybe there was a good reason for it. Again, this is what the defense throws out so that you get confused and you go, it could have been him. And I'm not saying it couldn't have been him, but the information they're giving out is not proof of anything. All right. Then it says Hammond committed suicide in 1995, several days after his arrest. Basically, his career was over. They've caught him for being a pervert, a sex predator, and he's a creepo. I mean, his career was done. He was done. The police were called to a La Quinta Motor Inn in North Denver. There they found Hammond dead, an IV needle containing cyanide residue sticking out of his thigh. Quote, "My death should satisfy the media's thirst for blood," he wrote in a suicide note. Though investigators noted a possible link between Hammond and the Hetrick murder, no follow-up investigation was done. All right, so because they were zeroed in on Masters, so there's no question that they thought, okay, the guy's a freaking weirdo, but we have no evidence linking him to the crime. Now, mind you, it was many years later, so there was probably no blood evidence in his house or on his clothing or anything else you could get him for at that point. And he committed suicide, so he's out of the picture. Now, there's one thing which makes people think this guy did it. And I'll tell you what that is. All right. So there were footprints. All right. There were footprints in the field. And this gets tricky. All right. So we have, and I really wanted to see this picture, but they put it up in such a stupid way you couldn't blow it up. So essentially her body's up here. This is down at the curb, and the person dragged her around to this spot. And there were footprints found there alongside the drag area, and also some other places in the field. And let me read you. I found I'm going to link this because it's the best site on that I found. It was from the Denver Post. Key questions linger in prominent cold case, the killing of Peggy Hetrick. I want to read you about the footprints. Now, only one footprint was found of Masters, only one, and that was one of the things they pointed out totally in the documentary, that only the tennis shoe from that morning. But there were other footprints, but the documentary only zeroed in on a few of them to make sure that you absolutely knew that Tim Masters didn't do it. One of the claims is that Tim Masters, that the supposedly that the shoe prints were adult-sized feet. The boy's 15. A lot of 15-year-olds have adult-sized feet, so I didn't even know what that means. Interesting enough, they didn't tell us what the size of Masters' feet were as compared to what the size of these footprints were. I couldn't find it anyplace. Maybe you can put it in the comments because I'm curious. Because, I mean, if his footprints were totally different size, that's interesting. So now here, let me read what it says here. Did the killer wear Thom McAn's? Now, Thom McAn was a type of shoe that was very popular in the day. And I'm going to, as a matter of fact, I have to point out how popular it was. I don't know how old you guys are out there, but but I even remember Thom McAn. Thom McAn was, let me see if I can find that. Where's my picture? Oh, there we go. No, there we go. Thom McAn. I actually remember. I always thought it was a funny thing because Tom was a weird misspelling. No, I would think it would be T-O-M, but it's actually a shortened version of Thomas, which is weird. And McCann, I always wanted an extra N on there, but there wasn't. So it was a weird, name that was done for the shoe store. And it was in like every freaking mall when I was growing up. It was always a Thom McAn shoe store. Super popular. Keep in mind the issue of super popular as opposed to some weird brand or something. So anyway, so her body was found in an open field. She lay on her back about 100 feet from the road, and investigators later diagrammed a drag trail. And over here, you see the drag trail, apparently left by her killer as he moved her into the field. That started at the curb and changed directions several times. Because it was, it's hard to stay in a straight line when you're dragging somebody, Investigators theorized that Hetrick's killer had stabbed her as she walked along the road. This is the original theory. And then picked her up, perhaps by the wrist or under the arms, like Masters' pictures, and drag and walk backward as he dragged her into the field like this, which would make sense. That's a good way to try to drag somebody. This was based in part on the dirt caked in the gap between the heels and soles of her boots and furrows cut into the soil. They also theorized that while the killer meandered as he dragged Hetrick into the field, perhaps walking backward, that he left the scene in a more direct line. So in theory, he went, and then he went and left. All right. We don't know the direct line he actually left in, though. Direct line could have been that way or that way. We don't know. The detectives were particularly interested in a number of prints in which, according to their reports, the bottom of the sole appeared to have small lines running all the way across the print, and as well as a small oval trademark or brand name on the bottom of a shoe. The detectives identified 12 shoe prints of that same pattern, and in the ensuing weeks, an investigator visited roughly 10 Fort Collins stores trying to find the brand. He finally found what he was looking for at the Thom McAn store in Foothills Fashion Mall, a short walk from the crime scene, where he identified the model of men's dress shoe that had exactly the same pattern on the bottom. Ultimately, the 8 plaster casts, and I believe there's a claim in the documentary that no plaster casts were done, but I'm seeing it right here, were examined in an attempt to identify the shoes that left them. 4 could not be identified. 1 matched the tennis shoes Masters was wearing the day of the killing, that when he was walking by in the morning. And 3 contained the same small parallel lines. 1 even contained a logo in which part of the Thom McAn name could be read. Okay. Later, after Masters became the focus of the investigation, the prints seemingly matching the Thom McAn's were a problem. Investigators could find no evidence he ever owned or wore that brand of shoes. Okay, so that sounds like that's a great reason to exonerate him. They went to his house. Those shoes weren't there. I don't know if they checked Daddy's closet. I don't know if he had those shoes and got rid of them. I don't know. They say, oh, it's not what a 15-year-old boy would wear. I don't know. Did they ever have dress shoes? I mean, did he have dress shoes to go to his mother's funeral? Did he have dress shoes to go to a dance? I don't know. This is the whole thing about Thom McAn shoes. They were super popular. Like everybody wore the suckers. There weren't like as many shoe store options as there are today, where my God, there's like a zillion. Back then, it was like you went to the mall. If you're a dude, you went to Thom McAn. I don't know how many people own Thom McAn shoes. Now, so they also said this, that while it was true that only one of the plaster casts was unequivocally a Thom McAn, it is also true that a former FBI shoe expert named William Bodziak examined the 8 plaster casts during the thing, and he claimed that 3 of them had parallel lines that were similar. So you have an expert who says these 3 are similar to that. All right. Then it says among the 3 that were cast in plaster, 2 were along the drag trail and 1 was several feet away. All appear to be pointing toward the curb. Okay, now we have an interesting problem. Okay, so if you're dragging, would they be pointing toward the curb? Yes, they would. So that would look like that's the killer's shoes. And then we have, however, Bodziak also concluded a detective could not be sure that what size they were. Was it 8.5? Was it 9? It didn't know. All right. Now, one of the problems here is that the other thing we do not know is who trampled the damn crime scene after the body was found. There was a bicyclist at the crime scene besides Masters. Detectives showed up at the crime scene. Detectives don't usually wear suits. And Thom McAn shoes? Maybe they were just detective shoe prints. That problem is we don't know. I don't know what the condition of the ground was, what was retained, what was there, who said, oh, look, this is where she was dragged. I don't know, because they were all over the crime scene. There's just no way they weren't. And I don't know if you did it properly, mind you, you would block off the crime scene. You would, before you took a step, you do photographs, you do video. We're talking 1987. Do you know how many cases I've worked where there is 0 video, where the crime scene isn't even photographed properly? Some of them I've been lucky to get Polaroids off of. So we're talking 1987. I have no idea how shabby this crime scene photography went, or whether they protected the crime scene. Do we know about this? Do we have this discussion? No, we do not. This is a problem with documentaries. I'm not saying that the killer didn't wear Tom McCann's. I'm saying that I don't know because the documentary is making sure you don't question anything. Now, speaking of the suspects, however, the claim is that Masters didn't have these shoes, but the doctor did. Now, I've seen a bunch of different issues about the doctor owning Tom McCann's. Would the doctor own Tom McCann's? Well, he's an ophthalmologist. I'm sure he dresses nice to go to the office. Does he own Tom McCann's dress shoes? Perhaps. Half the population of men did. So just because he owned them didn't make them the shoes. When they found the shoes, did they test it for anything? If they tested it and didn't come up with anything, well, then it's pretty meaningless. Just because he had a shoe, a Tom McCann that was like a Tom McCann, doesn't make him a killer because you have a shoe that was like the shoe. Because again, so what? What was his shoe size? I can't find that. So are we just throwing mud at him, even though he's a creepo and a pervert, because you want to get off your client? So is he a good suspect? He's pretty interesting. I'll guarantee you that. He's interesting because he is a pervert, but he had his thing. Did that mean just because he had his thing that he also went out? Mind you, he was not known to be at the bar. Now, this is important. Go back to the bar for a minute here. All right. She's at the bar. She walks out of the bar. She gets grabbed right here. And we're talking half a freaking block. People seem to ignore this fact. Half a block. She's already attacked. Who the heck is out here? Right here. Now, could her boyfriend have said, what the heck? She's leaving without me. Walked out after her and attacked her? Could be. Was there some creepo she was at the bar who had his eye on her that she was flirting with or whatever? Mind you, she was a huge flirt. She was only on and off with that boyfriend. She had a thing for younger men. There was some claim that there were younger men she was interested in, even at the bar. So there's a whole selection of possibilities at the bar. Somebody else saw her go out the door and walked after her and attacked her here. This is possible. The question comes down to when it comes down to Masters. Masters lived right here. All right, right here. I don't know what that boy, 15 years old, what was he doing out at 1 o'clock in the morning? I don't know. He only had his dad in the house. I don't know what he was doing roaming around town. I've never heard anything about any claims, any proof that he was actually home. It might just be that he liked to some play ninja, and walk around in the middle of the night, hang out near the bar and see who comes out. He's very easily, without a car, available to attack her. Then we have the ophthalmologist who lives supposedly somewhere nearby. Would he wander down to this bar area? First of all, did he go in the bar? Nobody saw him in the bar, so that would eliminate him from seeing her leaving. So if that eliminated him from seeing her leaving, he would have to be lurking around like Masters, Tim Masters, just lurking around down here, waiting for opportunity. And lo and behold, here comes opportunity, and he stabs her and drags her in the field near his house. I find that a little unlikely, and he's going out in the middle of the night in his dress shoes. Again, a little unlikely. Possible. And then, of course, he doesn't just have a scalpel. He's got something to stab her in the back with, a bigger knife. Is a surgeon who already has his thing in his house willing to go out and carry 2 knives with him and then just wait for some woman to come out to stab as she came out and drag her into the field where he lives? Possible. A little questionable. All right. So now I want to go to the next guy who I'm not going to get comments after this. So anyway, they didn't ever do anything with him. They basically went, we don't have anything on him except the fact that they're claiming he once owned a pair of Tom McCann shoes, which is not exactly great evidence. So then we go to the boyfriend. Why are we talking about the boyfriend now? Why didn't we talk about the boyfriend earlier? All right. By the way, did the killer leave fingerprints? She had a large purse slung over her left arm. This is important, over her left arm. She had a large purse slung over her arm. Keep that in mind for the defense story later, which is ludicrous. So they checked that. They found more than 50 items. My God, she carried a lot. Nail polish, lipstick, Tide coupon, a pencil, checkbook, 3 packs of cigarettes. Remember the pack of the cigarettes. This is important too. A library book and her passport. Why the hell is she carrying her passport with her? I don't know. which is interesting because I did not find her driver's license. And that was they were wondering, did the guy steal her driver's license? But why, but their passport was there. People carry a passport around usually because they lost their license. Okay, that's my theory on that. Because she wants to go into a bar and get alcohol, and she doesn't have her license. She's got to show something. So my opinion is she lost the license. So that's all nonsense or anything about the license. But they found four fingerprints left on fingerprints. That were Hetrick's fingerprints, and there was one by her boyfriend on a receipt for a video he had apparently rented. So her fingerprints and boyfriend had one fingerprint on something he would have his fingerprint on. None of the prints match Masters or 7 other potential suspects. So there were just no prints in the purse and all that, and that makes sense because I don't think the guy was interested in a stupid purse. All right. Were any of them left by the killer as he rummaged through his purse looking for money or something else? I don't think the guy rummaged through her darn purse. That's why there's nothing there. He wasn't after her money. He was after killing her. So he didn't touch the stupid purse. It was still just hanging on her shoulder. If he had been rummaging through that, don't you think the guy would have chucked it or done something else with it? It's on her freaking shoulder. I don't think he's interested in that. So they're not going to get any evidence out of that. And this is in the early days of the investigation. She did not have a car. And she walked everywhere, but she did have a driver's license, or she should have. According to state records, she had the driver's license, but they didn't find it in her purse. They did find a canceled check written in November. Now we're up in January now, about 10 weeks before her death, and her driver's license number was written down on it. It's possible her driver's license was already missing when she was killed. Her uncle told investigators he believed her purse had been stolen over the Christmas holidays, but she never reported it. Again, she's running around with her passport. I'm going to say her license was gone. So that's all meaningless. All right. So, all right. Now, let's go to the DNA. And this is what got him out of prison. So the defense was looking at all the things that were kind of wimpy. They were going for appeals, and it wasn't working. They went after DNA. They got DNA finally from these Dutch people in Europe, over in Europe. They were doing touch DNA. The old touch DNA problem that we have today, where touch DNA can be very useful if there's no reason for that touch DNA to be there. Like it's nowhere. Like if his DNA were found on her clothing, I would say you got the guy. Why? Because why the hell is his DNA there? If he wasn't in the bar with her, how is his DNA there? He doesn't even know her. So therefore, boom, that's a goodie. This was her on-off boyfriend. But this is what got Tim Masters off. Listen to this. All right. In January 2008, advanced DNA testing developed in Europe was performed on the clothing Hetrick was wearing when her body was found. This was the final piece of evidence that prompted the release of Masters from prison. What were those results? Scientists found DNA on the cuffs of her blouse, right here, and on the waistband of her panties. A waistband of her panties. Okay. Some of the genetic material, all of it left by skin cells, all touch DNA, was matched to Hetrick's longtime on-again, off-again boyfriend. Yeah. All right. His name was Matt. Now, here's the problem. Hetrick and her boyfriend were intimate for years, so it's not necessarily be surprising that his skin cells were on her clothing, and he was one of the last people to see her alive. Not only that, she was in the Prime Minister bar from 12:30 to 1:15 p.m., and she spent at least part of that time talking to her boyfriend, on-off boyfriend, even though he went there to have a drink with another woman. They had a little bit of an argument over that. All right. Supposedly, people had seen him hugging her and kissing her. And, a lot of guys, when you hug not so much around the shoulders. A lot of times you hug around the waist. A lot of times you put your little hands where your hands maybe shouldn't belong. You'll do this kind of thing. I don't know what he did with her, snuggling up to her, doing whatever before he had the drink with the other woman and went home with her. He was all over her. So that his DNA was on the top of her waistband, on the top of her, is not very meaningful. But it got this guy out of prison. Because there was never any solid physical evidence, when they came up with the DNA, they went like this. Okay, Maybe her boyfriend could have done it. Now, let's go back to boyfriend. He's in the bar. He offered her a ride. She refused it. Last seen walking out of the bar. How pissed? I mean, he's not that pissed at it. He's got another woman with him. He went home with another woman and probably did things with that other woman. Nobody saw him leave the bar chasing her. If he had gone into the field, he had to chase her out of the bar, stab her in the back, drag her into the field, do things to her, but go back to the bar and then be seen maybe with whatever happened and then go home. I mean, nobody knows he was like missing for a while. I mean, none of it makes sense. On top of it, did he go to the bar with 2 knives just for the idea of, well, just in case my on again, off again girlfriend pisses me off, I'm going to chase her out of the bar, stab her, and pull her into a field? I don't think so. And none of that makes any sense. Now, the defense has another view on this, which is that he didn't actually follow her out. See, the prosecution's always figured that she left the bar, walked this far, got stabbed in the back. Or, now mind you, this is interesting, some cigarettes. Her cigarette is like laying on the ground here. Whether she was walking home smoking, which is perfectly normal, or whether she stopped to talk to somebody and smoked. And then she turned and they stabbed her and then dragged her off. I don't know. But here's what the defense goes on about that. Let me find where'd I put it? They're now trying to claim this is a guy named veteran crime scene investigator Barry Goetz, now working for Tim Masters' defense, says he realized the extent of Jim Broderick's tunnel vision. Okay, by the way, but let me tell you what happened to Jim Broderick, just to be fair about this. Jim Broderick, there he goes. Okay, Masters is exonerated. Broderick is indicated on 8 perjury counts. He faces up to 48 years in prison because he kept information from the defense, basically, one of those discovery issues. He didn't talk about the Tom McCanns and so on and so forth. Okay. I say I'm not defending Broderick. But okay. So anyway, Broderick's tunnel vision was the reason that he wanted to win a new trial for Tim. The showstopper emerges from Broderick's box of personal files. And now we're talking about the Tom McCanns. Okay, but here's where it gets interesting. All right. Okay, I got to find it here. All right. Armed with the new evidence, Tim's lawyers. Now, I got to tell you, defense attorneys will come up with any story in the world. They try to bring people like me in and go, okay, as a profiler, give me some alternative scenarios. Just make them up. As a profiler, what can you come up with? I'm a fiction writer then, right? Okay. They come up with their own scenario of what they think really happened to Peggy Hetrick. Wymore thinks that it all began in a car. She was being abducted. Someone got a knife to her cheek because she has some scratches and her arm around her, and she knows the gig's up. She opens the car door. So she's in the car already, so you say. She's in the car. She tries to get out. Starts getting her right foot out. He grabs her and stabs her. The key to his theories are Peggy's boots. If you look at those 2 boots, you see that this boot has normal wear, but in the police photos, abrasions are clearly visible on the sole of the right boot. What the right boot shows is that she stuck her foot out of the car. What? Was the car moving? So, like massive abrasions? I mean, is she just getting out of the car? I don't know, abrade the hell out of the bottom of the boot. But anyway, they believe Peggy was stabbed being pulled back into the car because Barry Gott says the holes in her clothing prove it. The cut in her coat, the cut in her blouse, and the cut on her body do not line up. Okay, when you're going to stab somebody on the street too, they're in movement. So, all right. You have to move the blouse 1 inch to the left. You have to move the coat 2 inches to the left. Wow. So she's killed in the car, noted Spencer. All right, that's it, in the car, and it could be anywhere. Wymore theorizes that her killer or killers, because now they want to have 2 killers, next took her somewhere that gave them privacy, light, and a room to work. They lay her on a table. I'm not laughing at the victim. I'm laughing at the preposterous story. They lay her on a table. They wash her. They excise her. And then they carry her and dump her in the field. So he says, 2 people carried Peggy's Hetrick bodies to its resting place. She's carried, not dragged. That gives Tim's drag drawing no meaning at all. See, Tim said she was dragged under like this, but you see, since they know it was 2 people who carried her, therefore his drag drawing is meaningless. Although the fact is, there are evidence of her being dragged. So what the hell are you talking about? Oh my God. If true, that makes Tim's drag drawing, a linchpin of the prosecutor's case, a lot less relevant. All right, let's talk about the 2 people who 2 people in a vehicle. Okay, let's again look here. Here we are. Here's the bar. She walks this far. Now, she would have to be either get into a vehicle on her own, and then if you get to the vehicle on your own and you're here, let me see if I can find the picture of the side of the road here again. It is nighttime. Okay, so here you are. This is this is a road. There's some blood on the side of the road. Okay, so anyway, so now a half a block from, let's go back to that picture. Where's my picture? Okay, a half a block away, they get her in the vehicle. Let's say she gets in there on her own because she just wants to hang out on her own. All right. Did they sit there and chat with her and then she pissed them off and they stabbed her and then she tried to get out of the vehicle? Possibly. I'm going with one person, though, who never moved from the spot. This person was already there. She got in the vehicle to chit-chat. It could be her boyfriend who said, I was giving you a ride, get in. And we talked for a bit, and then they got mad and he stabbed her. And then she tried to get out of the car. He grabbed her, dragged her into the field. Maybe then he committed these atrocities to her to make it look like a serial killer. Okay, we could go with that. But then, of course, nobody noticed he's missing. He went out of the bar and all that. But anyway, and he happened to have two knives on him, But that would make more sense, at least if anything, the vehicle was sitting there. Could it be somebody else in the bar? She walks out. She's pissed off, and she walks out. She says, yeah, I'm going to take a ride. She walks out. Another guy in the bar, another creepo, says, hey, I'll give you a ride. She says, okay. And then they get in the car. They start smoking cigarettes. She gets this far. She's getting out of the car with her cigarette, and the guy somehow stabs her and then takes her off to the field. Of course, he's got to leave his vehicle there. So that's always concerning. You got your vehicle sitting here while you're out dragging people through fields. But, all right. But let's go with two guys. So now she's in the bar. A boyfriend and somebody likes to help boyfriend. She goes out of the bar and they pick her up, maybe kidnap her, and they go someplace and they lay her on a table and with no surgical skill, unless the boyfriend knew the surgeon, they put her on a table and for no reason, they don't even bother to rape her. Gee, what's the fun of that? And they cut off pieces of her and then they put it back in the vehicle. And instead of driving to because we're out, there's a lot of country area here, mountain area here. Instead of driving her someplace and dumping her in a ravine, oh no, they drive her right back next to the bar, stop their vehicle here, pull her out of the vehicle when people could still be going down the street coming out of the bar, and then drag her into the field. Really? Is that your story? This is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. It makes absolutely zero sense. This is the kind of absolutely ridiculous stuff the defense comes up with. And they put these things in documentaries too. And then people go, oh my God, that could be so. No, it couldn't be so. So nobody took her someplace and brought her back. That's nonsense. There's not two people involved. It's clearly one person stabbed her and dragged her. Could she have been in a vehicle for a few seconds chatting with somebody? Possibly. And never got further than this. More likely, as the prosecution says, she was walking. She was walking from here. Somebody could have been in the bar and followed her. Or somebody could have been just hanging around here, Sarah, and saw her and went up behind her and stabbed her, dragged her into the field. That's where that is. I'm going to get to the third person in a second. I want to check your comments before I go to suspect number 3, the one I just came up with, which is fascinating to me. This guy. And I don't know if anybody remembers this guy. But I want to check your comments before I go to that guy. 500,000 comments here. Okay, then. All right, let's see what you got to say here. Let's see. Remember the shoe stories, yeah. Okay, Harper asked a good question. How long would this take? Could he have the boyfriend have said he was going to the toilet, kill her, and come back to the bar? Could he? Yes, he could. If he just happened to have a couple of knives hanging on him. And if he had any reason to kill her, there was no motive. I mean, they were on again, off again. Good deal for him. He was hooking up with another woman and he could still have sex with her. I mean, things are going good for this dude. They were not a 100% relationship. She was flirting with other men in the bar. She liked young guys. There are people who saw her flirting with other guys in the bar. So all of a sudden he feels a need to run after her, kill her, and then stage this sexual perversion. It's a long shot in the heartbeat. Just nothing works for me. His DNA is meaningless. And the fact that it got off Masters is just interesting to me. If you don't want to convict Masters because there was no physical evidence linking him to the crime, I get that. But the DNA had zero to do with it. His DNA is meaningless, absolutely 100% meaningless. And yet that's how he got exonerated. Go figure. Let's see. I forgot the name of the bar. It's whatever, some weird British name. Let's see. Oh, that too. Yeah. He wouldn't do surgeries on her if he only wanted money. Yeah, they don't go together. They do not go. Personal killing. No, that is not personal. That is sexual perversion. Personal killing usually ends up with like a lot of stab wounds, strangulation, not stab somebody in the back, drag them to the field and cut parts of their bodies off. No, that's a serial killer or somebody with that kind of real twisted mind. Oh, the bag over the arm, clearly placed there. No, not at all, Waltzing Matilda. No, her bag was already on her shoulder. This is another reason I don't think she was ever in the vehicle. Because you get in a vehicle and you're going to sit and talk to somebody, yeah, maybe you're going to cling your bag to your shoulder, maybe. But a lot of times you just drop it on the seat. If they went someplace, you drag her in the field and carry your little bag along and dump it on it? Not necessary. The bag was on her shoulder because the bag was on her shoulder. She's walking along like this. The guy stabs her in the back and drags her there. That never left her shoulder. Nobody ever rummaged through it. There was no reason. He wasn't interested in the bag. It was just there, which means to me, she was probably just walking when she got stabbed. Yeah, not at all. She was so close to the bar. I mean, if you kidnapped her, abducted her, you'd take her someplace else. Why would you want the body to be found immediately so it can all come back to you? Wouldn't you want her to just disappear? She's walking down the street. We don't know who got her. Yeah, drop her someplace else. You don't drop her in the field. You drop her in the field because you don't have a car. Or I'll say this. You do have a car, but you're an unknown at the bar. If you're an unknown at the bar and you followed her out and you did that to her, you can sneak back to your car and just disappear. That would make sense. So I'll go with two. You either have no car and you're just, you're trolling around there and you came across this person and you took that chance. It's opportunistic. Dragged her into the field because you got no other place to drag. You got to get her off the street to do what you want to do, but you can't go very far. Or your car is in the parking lot at the bar and you followed her out and you thought this will be an opportunity. You stabbed her, pulled her into the field, did what you did, and then went back to the bar, jumped in her car and disappeared. And nobody had a clue. But probably not the boyfriend because people would notice if he was missing. You say another bar goer makes most sense. Definitely one of the two, either Masters or the other or bar goer. I have trouble with this guy doing it, even though he's a creep. I can't put a boyfriend in it. It just makes no sense. So I'm so far Masters because I have trouble with the pictures that he drew that matched the scene. The fact that he found the body and didn't report it, it was right there where he would be. And he had all that inclination for those things. So I keep Masters in the picture. I think nothing has proven to me that Masters didn't do it. I'm not saying I would have convicted him, but I don't know that I would have exonerated him either. But maybe they're saying because there was no physical proof at that time, he was 15. We should have never, ever convicted him, even though. But I don't take him off my list. And him, I do take off my list. I see absolutely no reason for him. So now let me go to the last guy. So I personally think, creepy as he is, I don't see that it will make sense for him to do it. I don't think that it makes sense for him. So I'm still with Masters over here. And then there's this interesting thing. This is just so freaky. And one of the reasons I want to show this to you is because Is it a coincidence or is it a connection? These are things you have to look at when you're profiling, or you're investigating. Coincidence or invention, or just a connection. Who is this guy? Does anybody know who this guy is? Does anybody remember? I did a whole show on him. I did a show on this guy. Does anybody know who that is? Tell me if you know who that guy is. Just arrested about a year ago. A DNA match to a very old crime in Colorado. Does anybody have a memory of me doing a show about that guy? Because there's a case I worked on many, many years ago, like in the 1990s. I worked on that show. Does anybody remember who he is? Where's my picture? Seriously? Okay, I got a picture problem. What happened to my picture? Oh, I don't want to put that up yet. Okay. I'm waiting to see if anybody says anything. Do you remember him? Don't remember him. Okay, I'm going to give you the picture. Do you remember this? The woman on the right. I did a video on her. Anybody remember yet? Anybody? Anybody know who that is? The Army case. Yes, killed the military girl. You got it. Yep. The Army case and the military girl. Okay. This is Darlene Krashok is on the right. Yep. She was in the military. She was in the Army at an Army base. The guy on the left is the guy who killed her. They finally figured it out, like 30 years later with DNA. All right. Why do I find this interesting? All right. She was killed in Fort Carson. All right. Now, when I heard Fort Collins, of course, I'm like, oh, is that an Army base too? Because he was in the Army, right? Both of them are in the Army. And he killed her in 1987 in Fort Carson. Now, Fort Collins is not an Army base. So that's one thing when you start studying, you go, okay, that's not a connection. Fort Collins is just a town. Fort Carson is an Army base. What rings to you about 1987? What about 1987? Isn't that the time? Isn't that when Peggy Hetrick was killed in 1987? Both in the same year, both in the same state of Colorado. Now, is there anything else interesting about that? Peggy Hetrick was murdered in January of 1987. Yep, it's the same year. Gets more interesting. She was killed in January of 1987. And Darlene Krashok was killed in February of 1987. They were 1 month apart, these murders. Now, what else is interesting about the murders? At the scene of Peggy Hetrick was in a bar. Last seen in a bar, left the bar, ended up dead. Darlene Krashok, on the right, was in a bar, left the bar, and ended up dead. There were cigarettes at the scene where Peggy Hetrick was stabbed, whether she was smoking herself or was hanging out with somebody. Darlene Krashok, there were cigarettes at the scene. Okay. Darlene Krashok was found in a parking lot behind a building, and Peggy Hetrick was found in a field. Both of them were found very close to where they had just been. So the person who could have been in the bar in each one of these places could have followed her out of the bar and attacked both of these women. Also, they could have theoretically pulled up in a vehicle, and both of the women could have gotten in the vehicle for a chit chat, and things went bad. Now, in the case of Darlene Krashok, I'm going to link my video on that below. I believe she got into the vehicle. I believe she was in a van. I believe she got into the passenger's side, chatted with the fellow, whatever. And I don't know if he's going to give her a ride home or not, but I believe she was killed in the van and then dumped out of the van. theoretically, somebody could have pulled up for Peggy Kettrick and said, hey, give you a ride. She could have gotten in. They could have stopped. They could have chatted, and then he could have attacked her. But then he'd have to leave his vehicle right there, which seems to me awkward. But anyway, I'm going to tell you the other thing that makes it so interesting. Peggy Kettrick, her left nipple was cut off. Darlene Krashak on the right, her right nipple was cut off. Now, when one looks at the Darlene Krashak murder, it's hard to believe that that was a brutal murder. She was tortured. It was a horrible murder. She had wire, like coat hanger wires, strangling her. She was brutalized in horrifying ways, and he bit her and other things. In this case, in the case of Peggy, she was stabbed quickly, and then less was done to her when she was, in other words, it was not an actual rape, and the person went straight to doing what he wanted to do with her body. But a month later, a similar crime occurs, also in Colorado, where a nipple is cut off, and other horrifying things happen, an escalation. Does he have anything to do with it? Now, let me show you where Fort Collins is as opposed to where what's the other one? Fort Carson. Okay, where's my, don't tell me that's gone missing on me. God bless it. Oh, here we go. All right, here we go. I looked this up. Okay, Fort Carson. Now, Fort Collins is, okay, let's start with Fort Collins. Fort Collins is up north of Denver. Fort Carson is south of Denver. It is almost a 3-hour drive between one and the other. Okay. Now, a month has passed. The question is, this guy, his name is Michael White. It took them many years to find out, to have his DNA end up matching with a familial DNA. So he was running around for God knows. What's that? 87, 97. Almost 40 years. He's in his 60s. Totally free. Was that his only crime? I'm curious of what Colorado's doing to find out the other women he murdered, because that was an incredibly vicious crime of Darlene Krashak. And if he is really guilty of that, then he's got either somebody before, somebody after, or many after, because he was like in his early 20s at the time. There's no way that was a one-off crime. And could he have been up in Fort Collins 1 month before he was down in Fort Carson? Now, it's 3 hours away, but that doesn't mean guys don't drive. Maybe he had a friend up there in Fort Collins. Maybe he had a relative up there in Fort Collins. He went to visit them. He went there. He had a good time. Went to some bars. Killed this woman. Said, this is cool. Nobody knows me. I'm just, I'm not from the area. Then he drives back to where he's got to be in Fort Carson. Now, if he's in the Army at that point, should he have short hair? The answer is yes. I don't know when he joined the Army. I have no information on this guy. They've not put out almost anything about his background. Drives me crazy. I haven't heard about the vehicle he was driving at the time. I haven't heard exactly where it's just almost nothing about the crime. It's weird. It's like he got convicted, but nobody wants to talk about who he is, where he was, what he did. This is just silent. I don't know. Did he join the military? No, 2 weeks after Peggy Kettrick got killed up in Fort Collins? Or did a short-haired guy go up to the bar in Fort Collins and flirt with her, offer to give her a ride and kill her, or follow her out of the bar? I don't know. And then a month later, he's down in the Army. He runs into Darlene Krashak, gets her out of the bar, and commits an even worse crime. That's what serial killers do. Could it have been him in both crimes? Now, I did try to check things out to see if he had any relatives, but we're talking 40 years later now. I looked and to see if anybody came. When I'm looking at this map, I'm like, all right, so he's down in Fort Carson. Does he have any reason to be up in Fort Collins? I checked a bunch of things, relatives, anything I could come up with to try to see if anybody was from the Fort Collins area. I did not find that. I do believe when he was finally arrested 40 years later, he was in Thornton, which was north of Denver. But, you know, we're talking decades later. So does that have any meaning? I looked into his wife and stuff like that and couldn't come up with anything particular that put him up in Fort Collins. But it's, you know, it's 40 years later. I have no idea what he was doing. Could he have been in Fort Collins? So in other words, is this another good suspect? Could this guy have been the guy who did it, who a month later, we know a month later, he brutally murdered Darlene Krashok and cut off her nipple, just like Peggy. Coincidence? Connection. I have no idea. I don't know if they're even looking at him. I would like them to look at him. I would like them to see if anything, if it turned out he wasn't Fort Collins, like he had a traffic ticket up there exactly the time Peggy got killed, maybe it's this guy. I don't know if anybody's looking at his past crimes. I would be looking at him to see if he has any links to the Peggy Hetrick crime. Not saying that I believe it's him, but boy, is that interesting because of the nipple removal. And 1 month apart in the same state. I find that interesting. What do you think? All right. Okay. Let's see. Good point. 3-hour drive is nothing in Texas. You know, also, sometimes we don't realize this kind of thing too. A 3-hour drive, the younger you are, the more you're willing to drive. I mean, I have driven across the United States at least twice, all the way from Maryland, all the way to California, all the way from California. But holy God, I've done that. I remember I drove to Minnesota every single summer without thinking about it because I want to take my kids to see my sister. It was my vacation and I got a free place to stay. And so, you know, I drove with 3 children in the car and a baby. Oh, it was hard. 3 children, including a baby. And I did it because I was young and stupid. And now I'm like, yeah, I'm not doing that. It's over 2 hours. I'm taking the train. I'm taking the plane. I'm lazy. I don't want to do that anymore. I'll drive to Ocean City, Maryland. That is 2 hours. That's about it. But I am not in the driving mood. But when you're young, especially dudes, they'll jump in a car. Hey, we're having a party. And they'll get in a car and drive 3 hours in a heartbeat. So I don't think 3 hours, it's not as close as, you know, when you're looking at crimes, generally speaking, people tend to stay in their areas. But if you have a reason to be in another area and you think nobody's ever going to even think about you, he could have walked in that bar, flirted with that girl, offered her a ride, said, I'll meet you outside, killed her, got in his car and driven back to Fort Carson and no one would have a clue. So could it have been him? I find it fascinating. Was the nipple removal part of the news? Could he be a copycat a month later? Harpa, good question. I don't think it was part of the news at the time it happened. I do not believe so. No, I think that's the kind of thing they kept on the down low, I believe. No, a copycat murder, but only if he knew that what had been done to her. If he didn't know that, there's no reason that he would have copycatted it. I don't think so. I would think he either is just a coincidence or it's him. I would go one way or the other, you know, because again, I've pointed out this so many times. There are a lot of serial killers out there. Hate to say it. And they don't necessarily, you know, kill every month for the moon, you know, so you can have a guy here 200 miles away, do this crime. This guy does this crime and they look similar, but they're not. But I'm surprised it wasn't in, you know, in the FBI bank there, because the FBI is supposedly, you know, checking out things that are similar. Wouldn't those two be similar? But when I worked on this crime, the Darlene Krashok one, I talked with investigators and I never got any news, although of any similar crime being committed in Colorado within 4 weeks of Darlene Krashok's crime. I'm like, what the heck? Now, you know, okay, I'm going to go back and look at my notes. I mean, like, did they say something to me? I never noticed it. But I don't remember ever hearing about that. Like they went, man, that sounds just like the one down in the other place. I don't remember hearing that. And they should have meant, that should be an issue. Because if you can find a guy who's in both places, then you got something interesting. So, is it in your book? Yeah, Darlene Krashok is in my book. I forgot what I called her in the book, but it doesn't call her. You'll recognize the crime, but it's also in my video. but I never knew about Peggy Hetrick at all. I never heard of her. So, oh, serial rapist. Certainly, this guy's a serial killer. Somebody who can go and carve up a woman in a field. Two possibilities. Either it's a person like him, and he committed the first crime, then he got even fancier, committed the second crime, and he went on to do other crimes that we don't know about because he wasn't ever caught for 40 years. Or could have been this guy who had this obsession, and so he decided he was going to do this thing, and then because I caught him on the other stuff, he killed himself. Or it could have been a teenage boy who was obsessed with that stuff, got his thrill, then got so the police were on him so quickly that he decided he could not repeat that crime. And sometimes serial killers do stop because they're afraid of getting caught. Of course, it could also mean that he committed other crimes and he's just never been connected. See, I don't know because I am not on the inside of these things, and it's hard to get accurate information. Always remember, getting accurate information is extremely difficult. And for me, I recognize that that's what's happening and gets me irritated because I know I'm being manipulated, lied to, things are being left out. I cannot properly look at things. For a lot of people who are not profilers, they just think they're getting, oh, that's what happened. No, that isn't exactly what happened. You're listening to the documentary. You're getting an agenda, a viewpoint, a side. And oftentimes you just never get any of the real information. And the print media is pretty dismal as well. I saw things written about Darlene Krashock crime, which were nonsense. I mean, absolute nonsense. And now we have these websites that they proliferate across the internet, and they're fake. But what they do is they're like foreign sites, and they take the English and then they or whatever, and they reinterpret it in the most bizarre way ever. So they say things that are absolutely not even accurate at all. So you got to really be careful about all that nonsense. Yes, he was caught in 4 or 40 years. 40 years, Clarissa. Let me tell you how that happened. Michael David White was 60 years old of Thornton, was found guilty January 24th of first-degree murder in the 1987 killing. He was caught in last year. So that was in 2022, 2021, 2 years ago. 2021, they finally went back in a cold case unit and found some DNA that they were able to run through the familial DNA. He has never been arrested. He was in the Army, so I don't know what happened with the Army issue there, but they got him through familial DNA. That's how they got him. And so that was, yes, the crime was 1987. He got arrested in 2021. That's how long it took. It said Krashock, who had enlisted after graduating from high school in 1984. She joined the Army. She joined the Army Airborne School. She went to, then her brutalized body was found behind a Korean restaurant about 6 miles from the base in Colorado Springs. She had been raped, beaten, and strangled after a night out with friends. They worked with the Army CD. The Colorado Springs detective worked with the Army CD. That is correct. They determined she'd been killed elsewhere and her body dumped behind the business. That is an outright lie. She was not taken anywhere and done and had stuff done to her and then brought back and dumped. That's nonsense. And I addressed that in my video. She got into a vehicle, a van that only went behind the building, basically. They had whatever, and she was attacked in the van and dumped out of the van. I will stand by that. I think the other stuff is nonsense. I thought there was a lot of things that weren't done properly in the analysis of the crime, which I did profile the crime, and it was with the detectives, and you'll see that in the video. But they finally did get him. But geez, 32 years. He was able to evade detectives successfully, but he couldn't evade technology. Yeah, he couldn't. But he's a serial killer. If this is the correct guy, and I say if, seems pretty likely that it was because of where they got the DNA from. If they just got it from the cigarettes, I wouldn't go for it because I'm like, anybody could have smoked with her and then somebody else could have killed her. But apparently the DNA came from locations on her body that pretty much the killer had to have touched. So I'm going to say It seems likely that he is the guy, although I was contacted by his sister who wanted me to work with the defense. And I said to the defense, okay, I'll work with you, but I need full information to see whether I can come up with anything that says it's not him. I need to know, I need to see all the police reports, and I need to know this and that. They wanted to use my profile, but they didn't want me to see anything. So I'm pretty sure that that's a sign that something suspicious about probably him. But they've never got him on anything else. Here so many years had gone by. He was a hardworking man. He had a wife for many years. She had cancer. I mean, he's like, oh, it wasn't me. But he got convicted, but I can't get much information about the entire conviction or the crime, the evidence outside of that. I mean, it's frustrating. I would love to know so much more, but I don't know. Maybe I'll have to write a book one day. I have to go out to Colorado and see if this guy will talk to me. But probably won't. Did they? No, apparently he wasn't really a suspect. There was no reason for him to be a suspect until later when they got him for the perversion stuff. And then they went, oh, maybe he could have done something to Peggy. Yeah. So that was way later. Yes, exactly, Harper. If he's a serial killer, I don't believe it was a one-off crime with Darlene Krashock. I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, so the question is, could he have done Peggy a month before? I have no idea. Just the connections are fascinating. But then what happened in the next 32 years? He didn't do a dang thing? Or have they just not linked him to anything yet? And I keep waiting. It's been 2 years now. I'm like, the guy, the amount of damage he did to Darlene Krashock was way worse than Peggy. It was a absolutely vicious, brutal crime. And it was not personal. It was definitely a serial killer crime. And I'm like, if he did that, that dude did not stop. I don't know how often he did things. As I point out, some serial killers don't kill very often. It could be once every 5 or 10 years even. It's not like every day, so, but I don't know if they're looking to, they'll probably run him through CODIS now, but I haven't heard him being linked to anything else yet. I don't know. I wish I did know. What about before Peggy? I don't know anything about anything before Peggy. I don't know anything about any of the people, because the information's not out there. Well, it could be, but then I would probably have to take a sabbatical from YouTube for a year and do a, massive amount of research and interviews. And then at least you get something that's more legitimate than that documentary, which, was not so great. Irritates me. Let's see. Was the I Spy ophthalmologist in the same category as Peeping Tom, making him likely to escalate? That is a good question, because you're right. Peeping Toms often escalate because the idea is to get into another person's private place. It's a space thing. There are people, I call it sneak and stand. I think I have this in one of my books. I call it sneak and stand. Sometimes what they'll start with is like, they don't actually touch you. They don't actually look at you doing, peep into your window yet. They do a thing called sneak and stand, which is they just get up near you and you go, oh, geez, what are you doing here? They want to see how close they can get to you, to see if they can get into your space. That gives them that little extra power and control, and to see what you're responsible. So that's one version. Another weird version is, and actually I was going to talk about this at the Hangout this week, but there was another guy that was just given 9 months for squirting lotion on women. And I've seen this before. So what you do is you squirt lotion on women on their backside, and it's like, you know what that represents? And then they walk away and you go, ha, 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 ha. That again is like a Peeping Tom thing. Then you get the actual Peeping Tom peeking in their windows, getting closer to their space, getting to see what they're not supposed to see. Then you get the ones who go into the house, steal their underwear. And then you get guys who take like bubble gum and stuff and stick it on their underwear and leave it in the drawer, so that the woman opens the drawer and she takes out her underwear. She goes, oh my God. And he can think about how she's going to be freaked out. These are all pre-rape type of things. So watching women through a video camera to do private things is pretty creepy. That is a Peeping Tomism. You're absolutely correct. Will it escalate to rape? or to something like they think this guy, since he's interested in that aspect, maybe he wants to get a little souvenir, you know, because those weren't actually left at the scene. Could it have been him? Well, you know, it's hard not to include him. Okay. It's hard not to include him because, yes, you're correct. It can escalate to exactly what happened with Peggy. Could be that he watched and watched and watched and wanted to do it, wanted to get closer and to take home his own personal trophy. Yes. That's why later on, when they realized what a creeper he was, they were going to look into it. And he supposedly had Tom McCann shoes. Now, the only problem I have with that is, how did he know she was going to be there? Was he, nobody saw him in the bar, as far as I know. Was he stalking women in general in the area in the middle of the night, coming from the bar? Possible. Would he want to bring them into the field near his house? I guess that's possible. I guess I really can't exclude him. I'll take that back. I really can't exclude him because he lived close to the scene. I can't. McCann shoes, it bugs me that if you know what his foot size is, for cripe's sakes, do you know if he wears that size McCann shoes? Can you not tell us that? I would like to know. I would like to know whether, you know, if is any issue of him stalking women. I would like to know that. See, I'm just missing information. But could it be him? Yes, I would go. Okay, I would go with this. It's hard to go away from Tim because of all the stuff connecting him with the drawings and the knives, the location, and the finding of the body. That makes it difficult. Doesn't mean it's him. For him, that he's a pervert, that he is, like you point out, peeping Tom could moved on and escalated. That he had an obsession with women's genitalia was that part of the crime, although the nipple was gone too, was that thing that he was focused on. Because he lived near this crime scene, could he be stalking women in the area? This was his opportunity. Dragging the body toward his house, it's kind of stupid, but hey, maybe he's just so obsessed he doesn't care. So let's go with that. So, okay, I think he's a reasonable suspect. I do. I just don't have enough information, but I do think he's a reasonable suspect. But the defense got Masters off on his DNA, which I think he's the least likely suspect of anybody. He had no reason to kill her. There's no evidence of any perversions. It just makes no sense. It makes zero sense. So I think he just hugged her and kissed her, and his DNA is there for that reason. So I'd take him out. He's out. Him, interesting. Now, is Tim Masters and the ophthalmologist a better suspects because of location? Yes. Because we have no idea if he was even in the area. But one does know one thing. He is a serial killer. He did cut a nipple off of a girl only a month later in Colorado. I would have to be looking into this guy. I would be looking into him to see if he could have been in the area. If he was in the area, I'd be going, this dude. And of course, again, Darlene Krashock got killed coming out when she left a bar, and so did Peggy. So we have so many similarities. He's a great suspect. I just don't know if he was in the area. So two suspects who had more, they were clearly in the area next to the field. And one suspect who we know is a serial killer who committed a similar crime, but we don't know if it was in the area. So there we stand. That would be if I were doing a documentary, that's a documentary I would do. See, I would do that documentary, not the bullshit documentaries that are out there. I would do that documentary. But that's not the way documentaries tend to work, which is frustrating to me, because I'm going to say you learn, even though I didn't go into a lot of details on a whole bunch of things, and I didn't bring any people to interview and all that fancy shit. What you got in this what you got in this, how many hours now? Exactly 2 hours. In this 2 hours is more information and more fair information than you getting from that documentary. And that's why so many times we just don't understand we don't really know what we think we know. And I suffer from that as well. It's tough. It's really tough. So anyway, that is the end of what I'm going to say on this case. At the time he kept his distance through the lens. Well, we don't know if he got tired of that. After a while you get bored of that crap. So that's sometimes why we do see escalation. It's like, okay, I've dreamed about this and I've looked at this and looked at this, and now I want the real thing. And so they move forward with that. So don't you have to include everyone who lives around there? Well, if you're doing at some point, the problem comes down to this. When you have a circle around a crime scene, you have to look at the bar, because she was in the bar. You have to look at all the people in the bar. You have to look at anybody who lives in the area. But at that point, you have to look at people who are more realistic to have been involved in the crime. Basically, Tim Masters just fell into their hand. I mean, they weren't looking for him. It's just that he saw the body and then didn't even bother to report it. And then they went into his house and found all the knives and the pictures, the drawings. I mean, you can't fault them for thinking, oh my God, this is the guy. Look at this creepo. This guy's mental. That's what they're going to think. And they weren't even searching for him. He just popped into their hands. He wasn't looked at for years because no one had a clue. He's just an ophthalmologist. Of all the people living on the area, why would they go to think the eye doctor killed the woman? You know what I mean? Unless somebody saw eye doctor at the bar, eye doctor stalking, eye doctor in the area, but nobody reported this guy. He just happened to live in the area like many, many other people. There was no reason to look at him until later. They're like, man, the guy's a pervert. And then they claimed he had a Tom McCann shoe, which I don't even understand whether that's absolutely true. And again, how many people in the area had Tom McCann shoes? Does that make him a killer? But yeah, they're going to look at everybody that they can, but not everybody's going to do it. You're obviously going to have to, focus in on better avenues and other avenues. It's like, so at the time, they looked at the boyfriend, but they couldn't see any good reason it was him. They had nothing on him at all. And she left the bar without him. So they weren't looking at him. And then Tim Masters just popped right in. So they looked at him, and him, I say years later, never him, which I find interesting. So that's the way things work. Oh, the Tommy Ziegler furniture. I think I've heard that one before. Tommy Ziegler furniture. I can't, it all depends whether I have anything. Again, I've always point out, I'm going to take my picture of this because it's the only way I can remember anything. And by the way, if I don't ever respond to you, try again, because it's just, I'm overwhelmed a lot of times with the requests. I don't know if the Tommy Ziegler furniture thing is something that has enough information to analyze. That's always an issue. Again, I don't tell stories. If I were a storyteller, I could do every single one of these, but because I analyze it, like this case, it was something to analyze. So that's why I was willing to do it, because I'm trying to teach profiling and crime scene analysis. And if I haven't got a clue, there's no point in me doing it. So that'll be something else. No, that's a good point. My late husband and his buddy found a dead body, but they didn't tell anyone because they were in elementary school and thought they'd get in trouble. And that could be absolutely true for Tim Masters as well. He said he thought it was a fake doll, but he got so close to it. The only reason that makes me go, is because he was so obsessed with homicide, murders. He was so obsessed with that if you saw a woman with her pants pulled down and half naked and dead in a field, you would think that would be thrilling for him. Not in a good way, but thrilling. Now, maybe he went to school and wasn't going to admit it because he was thrilled, so he's going to come up with a phony story. And it may mean he has nothing to do with the crime. He just didn't want to admit that he did see a dead body. That may be very true, especially if you've got back at your house, you've got knives and a whole bunch of pictures of dead bodies. Yeah, you might not want to say anything. So, yes, she does have pink hair. The lady has pink hair for the show. She does indeed. No. This is, one thing that we have when we have a prolific serial killer is that we tend to link him to everything. So Ted Bundy was in Colorado. Is there any reason why he would have been at that bar at that time and never been, looked at before? So probably the answer to that is no. But you never know with Ted Bundy because he was on a bunch of places. So yes, that's one of the things he said. Yeah. Yeah. See anything else here? Okay. I'm going to stop here so I can go make my dinner. Yes, I'm hungry. Okay. So anybody who's been here, thank you for being here on time today. I actually got here on time. I went to my granddaughter's soccer game, and she got 3 goals. So that was cool, and won the game for her team because they were really good 3 goals. I mean, she's got a really strong foot, so she dribbles around people and kicks right in the goal. She's really strong. Her biggest problem is that when she's not quite involved, she like stands around like she's on a bus stop, and I keep going, pay attention. she's 9, so pay attention. You're not on a bus stop. She's got some things to learn still. Oh my goodness. So anyway, thank you guys for being here. You're all great. Have a good weekend. Yes, everybody, have a great weekend. And I'll be back with the Hangout on probably, I don't know, sometimes I do it on Wednesday, but I'm not sure, Wednesday or Thursday. It depends on the news of the week, whether we have any breaking, fascinating news I need to comment on or not. So anyway, thank you all for being here. You're all fabulous. And if you're new here, please do support the channel. Yes, please do that. Please subscribe to the channel. It doesn't cost you a thing. Like the videos, check my playlist so you can see stuff, hit the bell, and join Patreon if you want to support the channel, or you can click the $sign, and I'm always happy about that. Anything to support the channel, because it's a lot to keep it going. So, and YouTube is sometimes is tricky, you know, because they like to demonetize some of my videos, and it's always very discouraging. It's kind of like it's like you do this video and you put it up, and you're like, you did all the work to do the research and all that stuff, and then to do the actual video and all the things you have to do with that. It's like going to work for an 8-hour day. At the end of the day, they say, oh, by the way, we're not going to pay you. Really? Thanks. They demonetize your video, and you're like, it's like, wow, that sucks. But, you know, that's YouTube. So anyway, thank you for being here, and I'll see everybody who is a patron at the Hangout, or whoever is going to show up who has nothing else to do. But do show up, and we'll do the Hangout this week, and send any ideas over for next week, along with the Ziegler thing. I'll have to check out Ziegler and see if I can do that one. I have heard that one too many times now. Thank you for being here. Bye.